So today we're going to work with something that's a little closer to what I do all the time, which is stuff with the fantasy world. So for example, here's one I'm working on right now. This is just for me, you know, if someone wants to buy it, great, but if I don't do fantasy wood carving on the side, then you know, I don't feel like I'm doing what I want to do. So, you know, do a lot of stuff like this. So, basically today, what we're going to do is we're going to work with foreshortening. So that's when you have something that is normal size, when you look at it in a normal perspective, and you take that normal item and you zoom in to a really close point on it and then let the rest of it go off into the distance. So this is just, you know, a barnyard, and it's a fence. It's made of what appears to be 2x4s and a 4x4, and basically we're just really close up on that one section and letting the thing go off into the distance, but we have a really big view of it right here. So it just presented as really cool idea to put a little house in there and imagine, you know, little people, brownies or whatever the case is, living in the stump. So that's what we're after today. So really what we're going to do here today is just get this main area here carved in, because once you get that carved in, you can pretty much run with it. Sorry about that. And we'll just get that running. So basically, we're just going to carve in this 4x4 and the 2x4s, two of them, up front and far away, as we have here. So we have here, what I've done here is I have cut the background out so we have a place to work, and we have the pattern here, and we'll basically just start working on it. So we don't need this anymore. All my tools were gotten from Bear Wood Supply, and they have great prices on the Schaaf Chisels, in addition to the Marathon Micro Motor, which I forgot to bring over here. Probably will not reach. Yeah. So I used the Schaaf mallet, also for sale at Bear Wood Supply, to knock out all of this area. First you cut that area in with like a Marathon Micro Motor. You just put in your bit, cut along that whole area, then you knock it out with a chisel and your mallet. So this is a good item. The Marathon I use a lot, and exclusively pretty much as well. So it's the best rotary tool I've ever used. I'll probably never use a different type again. Once you go to that, no other rotary tool really works very well. So use that, and then we can use cuts all burrs too to really auger out a bunch of material if we need to. But at this point, I'm not so certain that we're going to need to do that. So let's get you in a good place where you have a good view, and I can bring you down lower too. If you guys can't see very well, let me know. For the most part, this will just be reference here, and let's move forward. So to start this project, let's look at what our first steps are. So we have the first line, that is the most important line to start cutting on, would be here. And this line from here to here is jagged, and it's not even because the wood is obviously old. We're trying to make it look as realistic as possible. And it's not terribly straight based on it just being old. But from the outset, you really don't need to worry about how you're going to make it look rustic and old. So what we want to do is just create a straight line from edge to edge, and that's basically what we're going to cut. A lot of the rustic parts is detail, so we can worry about that during the detail phase. What we're really trying to do is get you guys to a point where you guys can just take over and run with it. And to do that, we're just going to start cutting here. So I'm going to start with using my skew chisel. It's a Schaaf 8mm, so that's corner to corner. And I'm going to point the lower end downward. And what that does for you is it allows you to see where you're cutting and also keep a straight line as you move forward. So let's do that. And you can hit it more than once, but there's a point at which it really just won't go in any further. And at that point, you need to start cutting in a different way. Now that we have our first stop cut there, let's look at our second point here. Now we have this initial line cut in, and now we have to put in some sort of second step. That second step will be at the end of the top of the 2x4 that's attached to the fence, and that will be here approximately. Now I don't really plan on doing this post over here, but we can probably cut it in just so that we can get rid of that material as we move forward. So now that our second step line is in place, we're just going to cut a line there as well. Now our initial cut was pretty much straight into the wood, straight down. And this line here, we're just going to angle it slightly, not straight down, but a slight angle. And the reason for that is because we're going to be cutting on this particular plane, and this one isn't going to be a straight down cut, but it'll be an angled cut. So let's just go ahead and put in a straight stop cut that's not exactly straight down, but more curved. And again, just to get a little depth in there, but again, you can only go so deep. Okay, now that we have that, what we need to do for the third step is to cut an angle on this surface here. What's going to happen as soon as we cut that angle in, it's going to leave this big part here blatantly larger than everything else. And that's okay, because we also have to work on this side and this side here. So let's go ahead and cut in an angle. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we are going to be heading in this direction. Okay, so when we cut into the block, moving forward, we'll try to create a plane that's more or less even from side to side and going down at least, going down at least a little bit. Like so. Okay, let's try that. There are a number of ways, and I always discuss this because it's safe. So, number one, I'm just going to use one of Schaaf's fishtail tools, and this tool flares on both edges to the left and to the right, and it's just a great tool. Just sharpened it, so it's really nice. So let's go ahead and just put in a few cuts just to get our bearings. You see how we're hitting our stop cut here, so we can't go forward. Obviously, if you hit it really hard, you just go right through it. But what we want to do is just create a basic cut just to start. And the other thing that I continually discuss as I carve is that the way I carve is I have my dominant hand, which happens to be my right hand, and it's the thrust and power. And then I have my non-dominant hand, which is my left hand, which is used to guide and steer the shank where I want it to go. And if you do it that way, you're really safe. You're not in danger of hurting yourself or other carvers around you or anyone around you, really. And also, it takes a lot of strain off of your hands. And if you're a young person, you probably don't need to worry about that at all. But if you're older like me, I got to save my hands. You want to save your hands, then it's a lot less effort on you if you carve in this manner. Okay, so I often go this way. And I often also go this way. And either of them can be held with the thrusting hand and the guiding hand. But if I go in this direction, I can only move so much, and it's still very safe. But it does give me two ways of holding the chisel, working with the chisel, and it gives me some good power that I can use here. You see that I can only move it so much. All right. So you can see here, I'm just going to do a little cleanup here. You can see here that it's already starting to create a bit of an edge. That's obviously not the flat point that it was at their initial stages. It's now starting to create a bit of a top to that set of 2x4s running across the side of this beam and all the other ones in the farm yard. So let's take this chisel and just remove some of this debris. As discussed earlier, I'm really not going to put too much energy into this one. This is just kind of getting cut out of the way. You can, if you I provide a pattern every time I do a one of these live streams, so you can just get the pattern from the group that I sent it to. You can go to Wood Carving for Beginners. You can go to, you can email me. That pattern is available. I can provide it to you if you don't have it. That said, you can use your pattern to get it on the block, and certainly do this. You can also extend your carving even further and create even more. You can go in either direction. So there's a number of different applications you can provide for yourself. So now we got a tiny bit more depth here. Again, you can only put in so much, and I'm just kind of removing this stump as I go along. So now we're just going to repeat what we did earlier. Just going to continue to remove a little more. Now you may see here that our other initial cut, our second cut that we made for this portion of the carving, it still has a stop cut in there, and you can still see a groove in here and here all along that edge, and that groove is going to be present until we remove it. So just don't worry about it. Yeah, it's not correct, and yeah, kind of an eyesore as you're working on it, but that will get its own work at some point soon. So right now we're just going to take this edge here and push it even further down into this section here, which would be all along the way. So we'll just keep doing that. And I'll turn it over so you guys can see as well. I just often carve in both ways. Okay, so now you can probably see that there is a bit of change here. So we have this major block here. We also have this section here. And it does, at least to me, it appears to be slightly lower here than it is here. And I'm just going to shore that up a little bit, but probably we're going to end up cutting it even more. But I'll try to get it at least as straight as we can before we move to the next point. Pretty good. I have a veiner here, which is not exactly what I need because this is really square in here, but we're not really trying to remove the debris and keep that sharp because these are going to change things also. So let's just remove any debris we can with the veiner. Okay, so now that we have this, this is considered pretty low relief, and we could just move forward just like this. So number one, I'm just going to drop this down a little lower, and so that we don't have to really worry about it. Again, you guys can worry about it if you want. You can certainly add it in, and if you did want to do that, you could just look at your artwork, note where the bends are, or rather the lines are. Got one there. This one comes down to about here, this is here, and it goes into there. So you could create that if you want. So at this stage, let's go ahead and look at this portion. Now, there's one thing that a lot of beginners, in addition to intermediate and advanced carvers as well, don't really like doing. But it's inevitable. However, you have your artwork here now, you've transferred it, it's sitting here, you see it, you understand it, it feels right to have it there. The problem is that we need to cut it off. And so we are going to cut it off, and we are going to have to draw it back on at some point. So right now, you can just take your pattern. My initial pattern is not that larger piece here, but this was the initial pattern. So what you can do is when you've made changes here and your artwork disappears, you can put this back on, try to line it up the best you can, you know, line up the lines like here, and then maybe put it to here, put the top up where it goes, get it lined up as best you can, and then you can use your metal stylus with your ball point on it. And then you can etch in all these lines all over again. The door, the window, just about everything that you need. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll get you near where you need to go ahead and draw it back in. Okay? So now what we want to do is, we know that this face here lines up with the edge here, right? And this edge here goes behind this 2x4 here, right? We can see that. Now, how to get there is what we're going to do is we're going to start scratching this section off. It will remain high here, but we're going to push this down to match up with this line. And we'll slowly bring that into play up to here. So let's try that. First of all, just going to use my fishtail again to just start removing it. So now I have this far corner here lined up with the depth of the top of the 2x4. So now we're just going to continue. There are a number of ways that you can get that off of there. And you could just go ahead and recognize that this whole upper area here needs to be removed. And you can do that, and normally I would do that. What I'm trying to do now is to let you follow along and see how it starts to make its changes before I actually just go and hack it off. We understand that this is flat, matching this line here, which is this line here. So we could just remove this entire section. But if I do it slowly, you can see it start to reveal itself. So I'll do a little bit more of that. And you can also keep your artwork around for a little longer. So you can see that it's starting to take shape. But at this stage, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this entire section here, lower into the block. Even when I can't hold the chisel, and usually that's never the case. It's only the case for the instructor because he's trying to let you view everything that's going on. But even when I'm not able to touch the chisel for safety, I'll be touching my arm for safety. So I could come in here holding the block and cut as well. Remember, I can only cut so much with this hand in this direction. So you can do that, but you need to keep your arm safe. Normally, it is always recommended that you keep both hands on the chisel. The wood that I'm using today, which is pretty common, is basswood. There are a number of different types of wood that you guys can use based on what's in your area. Basswood is known to be a very good type of hardwood that allows us to carve it pretty easily. So if you can get that, go for it. If you can't, ask your local hardwoods store what they have for carving materials. Also, there are a number of groups like the Wood Carving for Beginners and lots of wood carving groups. People have great experience with carving woods that they've used, so you can ask there. Okay, so now we really don't have it fully in at the moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little further, and in this particular instance what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it slightly higher here and going down in this direction. And what I'd like to do for that is it'll give it a little bit of 3D, a little more 3D for you to look at. So slightly higher here than it is over here, and that will give you a great view. So let me use my skew chisel again to gently cut along that line, putting a little more pressure on it as I move it forward. Now I'm going to put a little bit of an angle on it here. That just gets it a little straighter than it initially was. Okay, so now we see that it's kind of straight. Could be straighter, sure. You can make it straighter, and you can really get bogged down in trying to make it perfect. But at this stage, we're really still roughing it. So a lot of that work can be done later on. But it's all a labor of love. So if you like it, just work on whatever you like. It's pretty common to start in one area, go to another area, work on another area, clean up your background, come back over here. It's very common and normal, in my opinion, to move all over your block. If you try to finish one area before any other area, you're bound to have problems because they kind of, work out all together. So you work a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and so on. I think that's the best way. That's how I create here. If I created, only him without these two, the depths would be all messed up. I wouldn't get these hands in the right place. The barrel would be out of place. These would be completely unusable. So the concept really is to try to do work everywhere. That really balances out all of the work that you're doing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut in this direction in order to get the proper placement of this block here. So what I want to do for that is use the skew chisel to just remove that corner off of the block, the 4x4 block, and just kind of put the bottom of your skew chisel into that stop cut right there, running along the way. And I think it's not exactly straight, but we can kind of work with that. So straighten it just a bit right here. That looks better. It's a little straighter. And then I'm just going to remove it again, just getting in there. We're not completing it. We're probably going to go back and cut here again and again. But what that does for us is it puts a little edge on the block, and we know that we can go to this flat surface here and just cut all along its length, down to at least that position there, right? So now that I know how much has to come off, I can go back and do that. Now we're really down to that edge. So now I'm just going to clean it up along its length. Okay, so I think you can tell that it's slightly lower here than it is anywhere else along that edge. So since it's been cut off that low, we have to go that low, at least on an angle going down. So we have it here, so at least it can stay high here as long as you have a straight surface down to that level. So we have to cut down that way to that point. Okay, so now it's not exactly straight, but again, we're roughing it. And since we're roughing it, detail is not really a factor at the moment. So we're just trying to ballpark it, get it in the right place. So now what I want to do is consider how much of this really has to be worked on at the moment. And we know that based on your artwork, we can see that this line up to here and to this line here is really the face of this project, because we know that this face is directly parallel to this beam. It's actually two pieces of 2x4s here, as you can see based on this line, but let's just call it one item for the moment. So this face is parallel with the back side of this subject. So since this and this match, we really only need to work with this faced area here. So what I'm going to do is, since I used this to transfer the artwork to the block, I know that this is correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the distance from this line to this line, and then I'm going to mark it on the block. So I'm going to measure here, and I'm going to put a dot on my block right where that is. See? A dot. And I'm going to do the same up here to the edge, to this line, and then I'm going to put a dot there. And I'm just going to use a ruler to make that line straight. That doesn't look terribly straight, does it? Look at that. You can also use the point up here to your dot. And I think that's what I'll do. It's not exactly straight here, which is why this didn't measure up. But I do have a point here, so I can guesstimate it. You should try to follow, to the best of your ability, your measurements, because later on it doesn't work so well if there's a problem. So for example, with this piece here, I must follow every single contour of my artwork because it's so involved that if I'm off in one area, it could just destroy placement for another area. Okay, so now we have our line here. We know that our next point that we can work on is, make sure you can see, is removing this whole edge here. One of the best things about creating 3D perspective in this project is that we have this distinct line here of the top of the 2x4 that meets up with the face of the 4x4 vertical post, and then this whole side of the 4x4 post goes away. I mean, it's still present, but it goes further into the block. And what we mean by that is that from our edge right here where our line is down to anywhere around here where the end of the 4x4 is, will drop into the wood. And it will drop into the wood going down into the block like that. So what we can do is we can take the bottom of our skew chisel and we can place it right there at that corner, and then we can start cutting right on the stop cut that we initially created. And you can make it pretty deep, or at least as deep as you can get it safely. You can also use a rotary tool like the Marathon and use a cutting bit to really start to cut that out of there. Or you can just cut it off little by little, just like I'm currently doing. Now you don't have to cut down for the entirety of this area, but you can take quite a bit of it off if you'd like. Again, what I start with is cutting where the block meets, and then I slowly go back and I take this entire plane and I make it flat. By doing it this way, I recognize how far I want to go down, at least initially. Okay, so this is probably not far enough, but it's good enough to show you guys. Now it's kind of fragile right here, so likely this is going to break off. But you guys can make sure that you have a little more wood in this area, maybe in this area here, maybe an inch more, another inch more over here when you create your project, so that none of this breakage will occur for you. For me, it's okay. This is a practice piece and really only for you guys. So if it breaks, it breaks. So now I have a little bit of depth here. What I want to do is take this whole plane here and drop it down into the block and basically get it to match up along that line, because that line represents the current depth that I have. Now it has to go at an angle. It has to go at an angle because we want it to stay high all along this area here. Let's try to do that. You can use just about anything here. Certainly a Schaaf full-size chisel is great, but you'll want to have a large bit of distance corner to corner. This might be good too. It's another 8mm. It's a gouge. It doesn't have to do anything really other than to be able to cut. So there's no super perfect tool for that bulk removal task that you're going to be doing. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but there is a distinct angle now present. So we have this one, which is going in that direction along this line. And we have this one that is now going in the opposite direction and dropping down as well. So we don't need to line this up, right? We want this angle to be exactly as it is, and we want that edge higher from the block to exemplify that this side goes away. Now, I think ideally it is best to bring this entire plane down to here, at least as far as you've cut, down to here. Now you might have a larger, thicker block or a thinner block, so you're going to probably leave about this much for safety anyway. So you just take the thickness that you have down to a safe area, and then you would remove it down to there. Now, if you do that, you'll provide yourself with some pretty good depth and create a 3D look to it. Now, I'm just going to continue doing that. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. It's going to take a bit of effort to get that down, so just let me know if you have questions. I'm going to just repeat the things that I've done already. Now I have some pretty deep work here. Probably easier to do it this way. So I have some good depth to take off now. This edge is not exactly straight here. I'm going to make it straight because if I don't, it'll be off when I get the depth down to where I want it. Thank you, Crystal. Now, carving is fun. It's a little addictive too. This particular wood is basswood. In Europe, I think it's called linden. So, basswood. All right, so now I'm gonna just get that off. So it's gonna take some effort, but again, I want to fix this edge here, and I want you to be able to see. So I'm gonna hold my hand, or rather my arm, so that it's safe for me and anyone around me. Okay, so you saw it, I did it, I was still safe doing it, so the two-hand method, regardless, is still very helpful. Yeah, so now that that's clean, I'm really just going to start hacking it off. Now, you have to be careful, really, really careful right here, because you can only get so deep when you're using your skew chisel, and because you can only go so deep, it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a little bothersome, because you're going to be like, okay, well, that's as far as I can possibly go with the skew chisel. So now I have to go back to the gouge, and then I have to remove what I can, but then you're going to get stuck right here because you need to go back to the skew chisel again to get more depth in there so that you see what I'm saying? It's a back and forth and a back and forth, and eventually, again, you get stuck. So what a lot of carvers do is they just get their, their rotary tool out, and then they'll just put a cutting bit in there, and then they'll just go from where the depth is to where the height is, and they'll just cut a straight line. And then if they do that, then it's really just a matter of you hacking off what you don't need, which is really the bulk material, right? But if you don't do that and you keep following this method and you go, oh, it's not that big, I'll just hack it off, you're liable to knock this entire corner off because the wood is just, it's only so strong, so it's easy for you to just break it off. And you can easily glue it back on. Basswood is really easy to glue, so don't worry about that. But it does bother all of us carvers when we kind of know we shouldn't do it, but we do it, and then we break it. You know how that goes. So what we really want to do is, either hack it off with your Dremel or just methodically just remove it as necessary. Now, one of the things that I also normally do is I cut with the skew chisel, and then I move to the gouge. The gouge is going to be able to pull off a lot more material. But in recent years, I've been using the skew chisel for pretty much everything. It's a very versatile tool. You can get your depth in as you need it. And then I just go ahead and continue using it to remove parts of that depth. Now, can I do it over here? It's a little harder. You know, it's a flat edge. It's got a really pointy top. So maybe it's a problem. But you can take out the depth with the edge here. And by doing that, you can kind of free up a little bit of your time because you're not switching back and forth between tools. So up to you. I am sure that 75% of the tools that I use, or 75% of the time when I'm carving, I'm using this. And most people just need to get used to it. It's not any main skill or anything. It's just a matter of getting used to your skew chisel and seeing what it's capable of. Now, this is all round and not correct, and we need to get it flat. So when I'm here moving forward, it's harder for me to see a flat edge than it is when I'm here moving toward me. So that's why I change a lot of the times. Okay, so sometimes it's not so easy to understand what I mean by a flat plane. So let me show you. Let's see if I can find a small ruler. Well, I think this will do. All right, so you can see this edge here. It's kind of round, right? That's better for you. You can see that it's round rather than flat, right? So what we really need to do is make it flat from, I'm trying to look in the mirror, it feels like, from this point to this point here. And we know that it's got a kind of rounded surface there, and we want it to be flat. So what we really need to do is to get it to line up corner to corner and just remove the portion there that isn't flat. And that small section there is the portion, if removed, will flatten this entire surface here. So that's what I'm trying to do with my fishtail. Okay, so that's a bit flatter. Sorry, I'm trying to get this just right so you can see it. There. Sorry. So it's a bit flatter. It's still a little round, but we've gotten a lot of that round edge off, and it's getting flatter as we move forward. And we don't have to make it perfectly flat. Let me just pull out a couple more areas here that are obvious. All right, so now let's look at it again. You can see it. Now that we have even more removed, we can see that it really does have a good angle to exemplify this 4x4 behind here. Let me look at that. So I think what I'd like to do, and what you can do as well, is recognize that if this plane were a little flatter, meaning that this edge all along its length were deeper into the block, it would appear better, at least for me. And that's because I like to do a lot of super deep relief carvings. So for me, I'm always going about more depth if I can. But you can make this work here too. So let me look at it again. Let's go ahead and try to remove some of this edge here and see what we get out of it. One of the hazards of teaching is that you hardly ever look at your own work. Okay, so this edge here appears far too high. It also appears to be incorrect, and all of that is correct. So what we really need to do is drop this whole surface over here. We know that based on the artwork that we're really big right here and we're really small over here. So we need to drop the level over here and keep what we have over here. So we're going to drop that. That's also going to remove this stump again that we initially stopped. I was initially going to just do this with you guys today, and not have this part in here at all. But I think it helps the mind's eye recognize that it's a fence from the get-go, seeing that second stump. So you don't need it at all. And in the end, what we really want to achieve is the wee folk house, right? But this part is very simple for you guys to work on once this has been achieved, because it's really just a matter of doing the same thing. So even if we run out of time today, every single time I do a live feed like this for Bear Woods, the following Sunday I do another live feed picking up exactly where I left off on Instagram under my profile at Madcarver Wood Carvings. So if you go there this Sunday, we'll just pick up where we left off today. And likely that'll be some finishing up of this area, in addition to creating the house part. We have some good depth over here now. So what we need to do, as you've been watching, is pretty much achieve what we did here all along that edge here. You know, a lot of people ask me, why don't I just go to that depth, go to this depth, hack it off, and then you guys are pretty good to go. But if I don't do this entire lesson, it's hard for you to recognize what's happening with your project. So I prefer to just go through the entire motion. And yes, that means I have to repeat a lot of the work, but a lot of relief carving is repeat work. But I don't ever see it that way, because I've been carving for 30 years and I could just cut this portion right here and just zone away trying to make this flat and perfect. If that's not what you're after, then I understand. Hopefully you can just get the highlights of this lesson and run with your own. So now we have a pretty flat surface. It's still high here, and actually a little lower going in this direction. High, low. Going in this direction, the angle is deeper here than it is over here. So we'll want to correct that at some point. You could correct it right now. I'll do that right now. But you know, it's kind of a labor of love. You're learning all along the way. So if you don't want to fix it right now, you can move to anywhere you want. I often remove the debris sections with the skew chisel. Really just gives me a nice, straight, strong line. It's really great. distance across. It's not bad now, actually. A little high right here. Pretty easy since I'm working with the grain. It's a sharp tool, so it just kind of comes right off. But sometimes you have to work against the grain. That's why your tools have to be super sharp. But also for safety too. It's kind of a counter thought, but a sharper tool is safer than a dull tool. Okay, so that's about right. So now what we can do is try to retrieve the initial line that we had here. And our artwork is not exactly clear because it appears that this 2x4 comes in and then it meets up with this one, and this one appears to slightly go at a different angle. Now, that said, it's not that important. So let's go ahead, because a lot of those inconsistencies, one with the grain, two with the alignment of the entire piece of wood, all of that stuff can have slight variations in your detail phase. And when you do that, it's really just up to you how you want it to look. You can put pits and holes and, you know, bolts and a number of other things in it when you get the main shape. So what you're really after when you initially start is to create the shape. You create the shape of your project. And then after that, you can just put in detail to your heart's content. You can wood burn it, you can paint it, you can put stain for shadow alone. You can do just anything you want, but we need the proper shape first. So that's where we are. We're in the shaping, or rather the roughing stage of it all. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to follow my initial line. I have a good cut right here, ending approximately right here. So I think I can get a flat, a basic, pretty good flat line right there. Okay, so that is where yeah, it's okay. It's a little, yeah, it's fine. Actually, I think I will make it slightly larger, only because we're going to start taking off material here, and this line must be correct. If it's, and here, that's another point. If I leave room, so if I take this line, I make it actually out to here somewhere, and I call that my flat line, and I'm happy with it, even if later on I determine that it should have been this line, I can just take the material off. Just cut it off to your heart's content. Make it the way you think is best. But if I cut too much off right now, it's gone, right? So leaving a little bit of leeway on all your work, not a bad idea. Okay, so now we have a flat curve as well. And then you can create a second beam down here that straddles this one and this one. So you can also see that by making this top portion lower here and then extending it to here, that we've exposed the face of the 2x4 again. So it's really just a matter of you going back and doing what you've already done in order to bring it back into its proper shape. And again, I go to its highest edge and I go down to its stop point right here at this corner, and then I just try to remove all rounded area there. We know that this edge lines up with the beam all along this edge. So now I know that I can remove all of, sorry about that. So if your tools are sharp, then you can just cut against the grain here, which I will do now. Okay. Okay, so I've done that, and you can see one of the other issues that's occurring, which is your line, which you haven't really touched since the initial point when you drew it. It's going to be sticking up above your 2x4 line, and it has been since the very beginning. So what you need to do is to cut your line, cut this section down to here, and redraw your line, and then smooth in your flat surface to that line. And I think that makes sense to just about everybody, but if it doesn't, I'll show you here. So we initially drew this in, which is why it's higher. We cut to this side, we cut to this side, but never right on the line. So in order to get that to match, we're going to have to cut off the line, and we're going to line it up right where it's touching the surface, the top surface of this 2x4. And now it's there. So now we can redraw our line. I think it's basic. I think it's I'm gonna line up the bottom of the ruler to the bottom of my wood here, to the edge of my wood, and I'm gonna line it up with the top of the 4x4 to get your basic straight line. And there you are. So now you just need to straighten that, and you don't have to do it over and over and over again. You can just leave it until the end, knowing that it needs to be done, or you can do it right now. Up to you. So, trying to recognize real quick. Yeah, we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. So, I do want to recommend you guys meet up with me on Instagram this Sunday. Usually start around 12, and we'll continue the work. This is really the hardest part of this project, getting the shape to match your artwork. If you can get to this shape here with this top surface, this surface facing parallel to that surface, and this surface moving away, technically it's perpendicular. It's going to be really hard to tell that from this drawing. But that said, this surface correct as well. A little bit of this surface pointing downward, and also downward into that direction as well. This being your lowest point here, your lowest point over here. Well, technically here, right? But over here, this is going to be a high point. This is going to be a flat edge. You can put this in or not, up to you. If you do that, then you'll be able to carry through with any other part of this project, I think, without an issue. But if that's not the case, meet up with me on Sunday at Madcarver Wood Carvings and on Instagram. Remember, all the tools that I've used today, the marathon motor, the burrs, the chisels, all from bearwoodsupply.com. All right, guys, I'm just going to continue with this for a little bit longer. If you want to hang out, go for it. Otherwise, another 5 minutes or so. Just going to clean some surfaces and keep going. I also forgot to mention, if you use Madcarver at checkout as a discount code, you guys can get another 5% off. That's a good deal. I also teach private lessons. If you guys are interested, just send me a message and I'll get back to you. I use Facebook video chat so we can see each other's work and help you guys with your projects, or this project, or any of the number of projects that I've done. I've been doing this for about a year now, so there are a lot of patterns that you can get. I can send them to you if you don't have them, and help you with your endeavors. All right, I'm going to take this one off now. Got to do that skew again right there, just enough. Love these flared fishtails. Able to use that corner right there just to get into that little crevice. It's fantastic. All right. Okay, so it's pretty good. I'll end up getting this flat. I may even take this even further down. The artwork really shows a good flat turn on it, but it's really what you're able to achieve. We could cut in here a whole another 1/4 of an inch and drop this even flatter. That's really up to you, what you want to do. Hi, Bob. There's a number of different types of wood you can carve. This is basswood, and I use it most often. You can use birch. You can use gelatung, which is a rubber tree. You can use butternut. There are so many different types of woods that you can carve. Basswood, where I live, it's a big metropolitan area, so there are a lot of hardwoods stores, and there's a good selection. Not since COVID, but it's still present. So expensive, good pieces hard to find, thick pieces certainly, but still present. If you're in an area where basswood's not well known, I know that there are a few places online. I think Schaaf Tools sells bricks of basswood. I know that there's a few other places too that you can find basswood. I think Amazon even as well. I'm not sure, but I know that Schaaf does. So you could go there too. Let's see here. Birch though, be careful with birch. Birch is really tough on your hands. So if you're an older guy like me, it may not work so well for you, but it's definitely possible. Okay, so guys, we're gonna continue with this on Sunday. Instagram at Madcarver Wood Carvings. I'll do a live at around noon. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Have a good one.